Planning Commission to order. I would like to emphasize a couple of items. You didn't hear the introductory video that we would normally hear in these situations, but out of courtesy for everyone, please silence all electronic devices. We look forward to hearing your testimony tonight and appreciate you joining us. In an effort to have sufficient time for everyone in the audience to speak on these matters, we ask that you limit your statements to about 5 minutes. When you come to the podium, please state your name and address for the record and make sure that you're focused on new testimony not already delivered by other people on that same item. It should also be noted that we do have a slight shift in the schedule of rezoning hearings at City Council. First reading will be on October 15th, which is a Monday. The second reading will be on Monday, November 5th. That's a shift from their normal schedule due to other factors for the City Council. So at this time, we'd like to consider the consent agenda. Please, Denise, if you could read those items.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item 1, approval of September 5th, 2018 minutes of regular meeting. Item 2, September plats. Item 3, 9171 2018 rezone from the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District to the RT2 Townhome Residential Traditional District for allowed forms at 1201 South 7th Avenue. Item 4, 9173 2018 rezone from the RT1 Single Family Traditional Residential District to the RT2 Townhome Residential Traditional District for allowed forms at 700 South 1st Avenue. Item 5, 9178 2018 rezone from the I1 Light Industrial District to the I2 Heavy Industrial District for allowed forms at 1001 East 52nd Street. Item 6, 9182 2018 rezone from the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District to the RT2 Townhome Residential Traditional District for allowed forms at 801 North Duluth Avenue. Item 7, 9296 2018 rezone from the O Office District to the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District for allowed forms located at 500 East 69th Street. Item 8, 9319 2018 rezone from the RS Single Family Residential Suburban District to the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District for allowed forms located at 616 South Willow Avenue.
Thank you, Denise. I understand that the applicant has requested that we withdraw or defer number 8, item 8. Is that correct, Jason?
No, we had a request from my neighbor to actually pull item number 8 to the regular agenda.
Oh, onto the regular agenda.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Are there any of the other items, 1 through 7, that the audience would like to speak to? If so, we would pull that to the regular agenda. Seeing none, and entertain commission action.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. I would entertain an amendment.
Mr. Chair, move to amend the consent agenda to move item number 8 to the regular agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to amend the consent agenda to move item number 8 to the regular agenda. Does everybody understand the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Now the primary motion of the amended consent agenda. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 All those opposed, no. Thank you. Motion passes. So anyone that's here for items number 1 through 7, if that is all you were here for, you're free to leave. Everybody else, please stick around. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the regular agenda.
Motion to approve regular agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve regular agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Denise.
Item 8, 9319-2018 rezone from the RS Single Family Residential Suburban District to the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District for allowed forms located at 616 South Willow Avenue.
Jason Bieber, representing Planning and Development Services. The applicant is proposing to rezone this existing lot to the RT1 Single Family Traditional District. The existing home on the lot does not meet the current setbacks for the DD2 form. Therefore, they're looking to rezone it. They would also like to construct an addition to the existing garage to the east here. It's located at 616 South Willow Avenue. This proposed garage addition would be required 20-foot front yard, 5-foot side, and 10-foot rear yard setbacks if the rezoning is approved. The proposed zoning does meet the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan. The existing single-family home does not meet the required front yard setbacks of the DD2 form. If the rezoning is denied, the applicant can still construct the garage. However, the single-family structure will continue to be non-conforming. If the rezoning is approved, the applicant can construct a garage addition and the house will now be conforming. We have received some calls from neighbors concerned about the applicant and owner of the property conducting automobile repair. We have spoken to the applicant specifically and indicated that that's not allowed if this rezoning is approved, or if it is denied, it's not allowed on the property. So, because the subject application is consistent with the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan, for a single family use, staff does recommend approval of this rezoning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair?
Jason, so just to confirm, it's not about the garage, the rezoning is about bringing it into compliance with the setbacks.
Yeah, that existing house just doesn't meet the setbacks, so that's what we're looking at doing, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you. Is the applicant here this evening? Applicant for item number 8, come forward, state your name and address for the microphone, please.
I am the applicant. Any questions?
Aim the microphones down so we can hear you. Thank you.
I am the applicant. Any questions?
And your name and address for the record?
Robin Erickson, 616 South Willow Avenue,
Okay.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Thank you. Anything to add to Jason's comments?
I can say that we have done some work on vehicles for our friends and family. You know, I understand that that's not allowed. We don't intend to build a business, anything like that. It specifically just saves me money, saves my family money, and you know, that helps me out. My intent to build this garage is to be able to protect my property, my assets, because vandalism is getting worse in the area. So that's why we're here.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Doesn't appear so. Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address this item? Come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Roxanne Strang. I reside at 1701 West 15th Street, which is just kitty corner across the street from the Erickson residence. And I'm here regarding the rezoning. I've talked to several neighbors. Unfortunately, we have some elderly people in our neighborhood who couldn't be here or don't drive. They don't want the rezoning done. To our understanding and talking amongst us, it is going to be an auto repair shop with a auto lift inside to be able to conveniently change oil and so forth. The past year or so, we've had several vehicles parked on the corners of Willow and on 15th Street, making it a hazard to see around the corner for oncoming traffic. There's already a 2-stall garage at that address, which are not being used for vehicles except for one side, which they do auto repairs quite often. There's a lot of small children in our area and a lot of elderly people that walk their dogs several times a day, so we don't think that's convenient. We also feel that there's enough traffic in our area due to people avoiding 12th Street lights and so forth, and the speed limit down 15th Street in our area. And I just want to say that our neighbors, believe this rezoning is an auto repair business, and we do not want it in our neighborhood, and we want to keep it out.
Okay,
Thank you.
Is there any questions from the commission? Okay, hearing none. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to item number 8? Seeing none, entertain commission action.
Make a motion for approval of item number 8.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item number 8. Any discussion?
As Commissioner Sershin asked earlier, this is just for the house. They can build a garage either way, whether we rezone it. We're just bringing the house into compliance. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't pass this, rezone this.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'll agree with that, and I'll suggest that you Roxanne talk to the staff afterwards. So if you have questions and think there's an auto repair business going on there, they can tell you who at the city you should talk to about getting that taken care of. But like Steve said, this is about getting the house into compliance and not about the garage or an auto repair business, because that wouldn't be allowed in this zoning.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I think that points out the importance of the follow-up that'll take place.
Okay. Other discussion? Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve item number 8. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Item 9, 8738-2018 rezone from the S1 General Institutional District to the RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density and CN Conservation Districts for allowed forms located at 6300 West 41st Street.
The applicant here is looking at rezoning roughly 5.32 acres from the S1 General Institutional District to the RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density District on the west portion, and then some CN Conservation District on the east portion, as you can see by the exhibit here. The applicant is looking to construct a 3-story, 48-unit senior living apartment complex on the lot. This is located north of West 41st Street and east of South Keene Park Road. West 41st Street is classified as a limited access arterial street. The existing access for the church is currently relatively close to 41st Street on Keene Park Road. Traffic engineering and staff feel that we should move this access farther to the north, and that should help alleviate some of the concerns with cars backing up and having trouble turning right onto 41st Street at the light there. The proposed apartment building will be required 25-foot front yard, 10-foot side and rear yard setbacks. The applicant has worked with the neighborhood for several months now and is providing a 60-foot side yard setback along that north property line. The MD2 form would allow a maximum of 3 stories and 45 feet in height and 48 dwelling units per building. Parking for this elderly apartment is 0.75 spaces for each dwelling unit. It gives them a total of 37 spaces required. They are indicating some surface parking spaces as well as some underground parking spaces for the residents and visitors. A level B buffer yard is required along the north property line adjacent to those single-family houses. This includes a 15-foot setback, 2-foot high berm or 4-foot fence, and 30 units of landscaping for every 100 lineal feet. The applicant has also worked with the neighborhood and is proposing to do a 2-foot berm with a 6-foot fence on top with some additional landscaping and that 60-foot setback, as I had indicated earlier. The concept plan does indicate a significant drainage pond, detention pond on the east side of the property, which is roughly 2.09 acres. They are proposing now to rezone that to CN. This should only allow detention area on that specific lot. The pond should alleviate some of the stormwater issues that the site currently has and the neighbors have to the north and to the east. The existing S1 General Institutional District would allow multifamily dwellings above the first floor as well as assisted living of 3 stories, 45 feet, and an unlimited number of units, both of which have setbacks of 20 foot for front yards, 10 and 0 foot for rear yards. However, they would be required a 45-foot buffer yard along the north side. The proposed RA2 apartment residential moderate density district does cap that number of units to 48 per building, which you see here, they can only build 48 units per building on this one lot. Further, that concept plan does indicate, as I indicated before, that 60-foot increased buffer yard along the north property line. And they've also agreed to do that 2-foot berm and 4-foot fence to hopefully alleviate some of the incompatibility issues of this 3-story apartment complex. Finally, the applicant is addressing traffic concerns by moving that existing church access to the north, as I had indicated earlier, to do a dual access with the church and these proposed senior apartment complexes. Because the subject application is consistent with the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan, traffic and drainage concerns have been reviewed and will need to be addressed with engineering submittals and construction documents, and the increased buffer yard should improve the incompatibilities between what is allowed and what's proposed to the existing single-family uses to the north. Staff does recommend approval of this rezoning with the following conditions. 1, the required side yard setback, that'd be along the north side. North property line would be a minimum of 60 feet. And 2, the buffer yard along the north property line shall include a 2-foot berm and 6-foot privacy fence that the applicant has agreed to. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair? Jason, so we've seen this one before, and just to make sure that I understand all the changes. So the east side of the property is going to be zoned, if the rezoning passes, zone CN. What, if anything, could be built there?
CN is specifically used for drainage, natural drainage facilities, detention ponds, and things like that. They couldn't construct any buildings over there.
Okay, so without coming back for rezoning to change it to something else, that would be CN, nothing can get constructed there.
No, it has specifically stay for drainage and detention pond uses.
Okay, and with the RA2, it's a max of 48 units per building. And we're approving not the site plan, we're approving this for the ground, right? So whether or not it's this applicant or somebody else with a different plan, we're approving looking at the ground, not what the proposed build is, the way the building faces or anything like that. All we're looking at is, should that piece of ground be RA2 with a 60-foot setback on the north, and then a 2-foot berm and a 6-foot fence, correct?
You are correct. If the applicant would not construct this, anybody else that came to construct an apartment complex on here would still have to adhere to that 60-foot setback and the 2-foot berm and 6-foot fence.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the
I have
commission?
a question. Jason, would you speak a little more about what's changed from the original application that's significant in your mind, particularly with regards to drainage for the entire site?
Absolutely. We do have one of the concept pictures. This is concept C, concept C that they submitted. This was one of the original submittals. You can see that whole property that is proposed to be zone CN now did have a building on it, and the detention pond was shrunk into the east and then farther to the south. With a little bit more drainage analysis, the applicant and Aaron Norman with DGR feels that this spot for the detention pond is actually better. It's a better location for the natural flow of the existing site. So it should help alleviate a lot of the drainage issues in the area.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Jason. Is the applicant here this evening? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Gail Swenis, and I am one of the developers. Jason has explained everything quite well, the changes that we've been making. And Aaron Norman here is our engineer, and he has a couple updates.
Okay.
Thank you, Commission. As you can see here, Aaron Norman, DGR Engineering. After the last meetings, we've met with city staff and as a team, as the developers, we kind of looked at it and realized drainage is an issue out here and decided that making the drainage pond up where it naturally wants to drain today is probably the best interest of everybody around, and let's remove one of the buildings and just focus on one building for the site. So they kind of scaled back their proposed plans and more focused on, the concerns the neighbors had and city staff. As far as drainage goes, the detention pond, we're gonna parcel off about 2 acres with the goal to meet all engineering design standards for city staff or city to actually take over ownership and maintenance of the pond in the future. And also to caveat that too, the city has hired another independent engineering firm to analyze the drainage outside of our basin and use ours to see how the whole system functions today and if any improvements need to be made as well. So there's a lot of eyes on the drainage at the moment, not only on our site, but the surrounding areas as well. The building placement, we've seen a few options on the building placement, flipped and not flipped, and 30 feet off the property line, now we're 60 feet off the property line. We kind of orientated the building south because, as you've seen before, the church is losing access to the parking lot, so we're going to share an access on the north side of the church property between our 2 facilities, and lends itself for our building to face towards that access road for drive and access and accommodate yet a 60-foot buffer in the back. As part of that too, that leaves room for a 2-foot berm and trees in the back and allow us to slope and grade the land around the building to yet try to get all that water to the pond where it belongs. So we're trying to keep all our pavement to the south where we can route stuff through storm sewer and get it to the pond and swale the ground on the north side of the building, keep it grass and less pavement up close to the residents. Any questions?
Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I have 2 for you. One, the outside engineer that's looking at the whole area, would those improvements recommended be city responsibility or developer responsibility?
They are working for the city, from what I understand.
That would be my assumption too, if they're looking at outside your site. And the second question is, will a 2-foot berm and a 6-foot fence impact the drainage at all? Or do you think that's an okay thing?
And that's something we're looking at too. If we put a berm up there, we stopping water going one direction or another where it needs to be. But it's something the residents kind of wanted. We had a meeting a week ago with some representatives of the neighborhood and city staff and talked about a few of these issues, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Did you say the orientation of the building had something to do with drainage?
It helps, not only traffic and access to our site, but drainage. We can keep that dirt in the back and build a swale. Right now on the westerly side of the building, there's a low spot that holds water. We can help try to mitigate that water around the building with the grass swale. Less pavement back there. So, slow the water down a little bit too.
All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Just one more question regarding the drainage. So we understand that you guys, are obligated to look at drainage on the site, but that you're looking at drainage in the surrounding area. Can you define what that is? Is it the entire, is it the 15 acres of the church site, or?
So the other consultant will be looking at areas upstream, we'll call it, so westerly of Keene Park Road, school property. There's some possible concerns of water coming off that property on our site, and as well as downstream, the pipe that will convey our water to the outlet. They're looking at those basins and drainage to see if it's adequately sized. As we reiterated before, we're gonna treat our site like it was a pre-developed site, so essentially back when it was a cornfield or a grass, and so we can't release any more water than what it did back at that day. And so we're taking the whole 14 acres and considering that into our calculations, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak to this item?
Hi, my name is Judy Donovan. I live at 6105 West Oscar House Circle. Thank you for letting me talk tonight. Thank you, audience, too, for listening to this. I speak on perhaps not for all of the 31 and plus household neighbors that have formed a group to protect our interests, but certainly a vast majority of them. So we're trying to keep this short and sweet. Tonight, you must consider and recommend to the City Council the approval or disapproval of the proposed zoning change and the conditions you believe should be attached to that recommendation. Those conditions are what I am here to address. If you recommend the approval, we would like you to consider the following part of your recommendation, all which were original concerns to us and or the city. There's three major concerns we had with this development. The first one is to the traffic on Keene Park Road, which has been talked about already. We've met with the city on this. They've done a study. We're trusting the city has done a study, and they have done considerate studies and looking at this and the flow of the additional traffic and its impact of the safety and welfare of the school park and ball fields don't seem to be a concern, and they said the road can handle that. We're trusting their judgment on that. We are a little concerned with the additional traffic and the small size of the Keene Park Road, but we're leaving it up to the professionals to decide if that's feasible or not. As to the water issues, we once again are trusting the city and the developer that will take all steps necessary to decrease the water flow and its destructive impact on our neighborhood that we've had for years and others down further in the street. There has been additional studies done from the city, and they're in the middle of a study now, which after our big concerns and videos and pictures that we've sent and shown everyone, has drawn to the conclusion of the large retention pond needed and the study needed for this whole area for the drainage. With the increased size of the detention pond and an additional firm hired by the city, everybody has realized this is a major concern and issue. On other issues, except for the building placement, we trust that will be appropriately addressed as it has been, working with the developers, fencing, berms, landscaping, which is all part of the required for zoning. We trust they will work with us in doing that, and the city and the developer for good promises that have been done. This leads us to one final issue of the placement of the building. I got a few pictures here, if I could show that. Their current proposal this would be a sight line of the building where it would stand and how it would reflect on our houses. This will keep the sun out of many of our backyards for November, December, and part of January, as by this architectural drawing for the size of the building and where it stands on the land. This makes our backyards, as you would consider a goldfish bowl, as they peer down into our yards and decks. This is a drone picture from the height of the building where it would look into our backyards for the houses that would be directly affected here. I have one more that kind of really shows how our backyards would be shown, and the neighbors, potential neighbors in the apartments would have looking into our backyards. I'd just like you to consider that for where the building is standing. Their initial proposal faces with the building the opposite way, which we wanted from the start. This would push the building back and would have a direct improvement on us looking at a building out of our backyards, and then with that the people living in the apartment will not be able to see inside our houses and look directly into our backyards. And as you can see, which you saw already, their proposal, and you can see the big difference with the setback for our land. So an earlier proposal with the building facing north considered our enjoyment of the sun and air and gave us the privacy we deserve with the extra distance. 60 feet now is their proposed, and the original with the building flipped would be a 98-foot setback, and that's what we wish. The future development now, as I know, has a huge detention pond that it will affect this land too. As to getting on and off Keene Park Road to the new building, city traffic has never formally objected to the second entrance, which we think can be done if the building is flipped the other way. And then the building could be pushed back and turned around with a second entrance for the people in that apartment to gain access to the entrance, along with the church still having their access road to the entrance.
You're about a minute over the 5 minutes, so if you could sum up briefly.
Yep. Those are our main concerns. The big thing is the water issues looks like it's going to be taken care of, and we're trusting that's going to be done. Our big concern is the area of the building. We would like it flipped to be with the road is the big concern, adding additional road on the back side of it for the entrance. Any questions?
Are there any questions from the commission? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Bridget Myers, 6209 West Oscar House Circle. I live up the road from Judy. Just some things that were brought up tonight that just kind of brought some concern to me. Would you mind putting up concept C? That's not too much trouble. When we were originally told at the second meeting, the neighborhood meeting, the reason that they really liked this plan is we were advised that that road back there would serve as curb and gutter and drainage to that detention pond. So now that this is flipped the other direction, I got big concerns because they guaranteed us that that was going to solve a lot of our problem, that road with the curb and gutter. And now they flipped it the other way, and now we don't have any curb and gutter to guide that to that detention pond. The road over on Roosevelt and Keene Park, that water overflows over Keene Park Road into our area. It's part of the reason that they're doing the water study. We haven't had a water study done in our area since 2002, which is pretty amazing for how much water trouble they've had significantly the last 12 years. So my concern is this land isn't even sure that we can actually even build on it yet until that water study comes back. So my concern is if you let them rezone this and the developers aren't able to put up what they were, S1 and the independent assisted living wouldn't be able to go there either because the water study is going to state that it's not going to be able to be built upon. What we were told in a meeting last Tuesday with the city is that they're going to do some boring tests in the ground to check the water table levels. To see if this land is even going to be able to be developed. So for me, chicken before the egg, cart before the horse, however you want to call it, by approving this, you're opening us up to then we can have RA2 development done back there, which could be any type of apartments, not just assisted living or other things. So for me, I think you keep it where it is because if you change it, you're opening us up to other things. And this is not a done deal. If this water study comes back, they're not going to build there anyways, and then we're going to be stuck with the rezones. The other thing that I just had a concern about with the concept C too, I just want to add, That is what we asked from the very beginning. We've had several neighborhood meetings, and that was the number one thing next to drainage that the neighbors wanted. Concept C, everybody was okay with. The only concern was the size of the detention pond, and it was asked that that wing there on that second building be flipped. And we never did ever hear back from the developer on if that was even an option. I see that's off the table, but what you're not seeing on this concept is on the other side of that detention pond where the city's purchasing that 2 acres, there is enough land that potentially they could put a second building. So they're not talking about that right now, but there is probably plans for a second building with the rest of that land left east of the church. So when they say that they've shrunk it down to 1 building, that might be the plans for now, but there's nothing stopping them from doing it in the future and adding a second building and adding that second location and doing a road right on the east side of the church where it already runs to 41st Street. So the distrust through the process has created some concerns with the neighbors, and that's why we ended up retaining an attorney, because we weren't being heard and they weren't negotiating and working with us. We really want to work with these developers, but concept that is being presented to you today is not what the neighbors asked for, and we've been more than willing to work with these guys. Most of the changes that have happened is because of city regulations, not because of what the neighbors were necessarily asking. It was because of the consultant that was hired by the city and the report that came in. So we're just asking you to consider that today when you go to make your vote, that if you could put this on hold for another 3 months. It hasn't been developed for 30 years. What's another 3 months to wait for the water study to come back? And if it says it's okay, we will trust the water study. But as of right now, we have big concerns. We have 2 different engineers saying 2 different things. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for what you do.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? No? Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Arlie Brindy. I work at Brindy and Metters Law Office here in Sioux Falls. It's 110 North Phillips Avenue today, and in a week it'll be 2900 South Phillips Avenue, because the Huey building is going to become something other than the place where I've been for longer than many of you are old. I represent 31 families, and I've had calls from others. There you go. Just in perspective, that's the approximate height of the wall, the back wall of the building, the way they propose it now. 60 feet from the property line. And it's an ominous structure that affects half the houses for people that I represent. Number 2, the city planning has talked about the Shape Sioux Falls 2035 Chapter 4 Transitions Exhibit 4B. I'd like to read an excerpt from that to you. The new zoning district is generally, it's a typographical, is generally may have potential conflicts with existing adjacent zoning districts, which may be remedied or minimized through project design, et cetera, et cetera. Landscaping, buffering, screening, and compatible heights and scale methods should be employed to minimize negative effects. We agree with the landscaping. We haven't complained about that. We're really only here complaining about one thing, trusting that this will all work out in the long run. Landscaping, buffering, screening, and compatible heights and scale methods should be employed to minimize negative effects. Compatible heights and scale methods should be employed. And I submit to you on behalf of my clients and from my observation, if the building were flipped, the neighbors could live with that without if they feel a dagger in their heart. They said, we can live with that. The pitch early on for this proposal was, we'll put in a curb and gutter, we'll run the water to the pond. Well, the pond was initially way too small. Now it's bigger. And I proposed that this detention pond with the building backed to the south, giving much more light, much more air, much more privacy to my clients up and down the street, is the right thing to do. And it's, once again, I tell you, it's a horrible death to be talked to death. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Okay, any questions from the commission?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this item? Okay, hearing none. I think we had enough input that it might be appropriate to bring up the applicant briefly to respond to some of the comments from the community. Your option.
What questions do you have for me?
Any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Would you talk about the flipping of the building, whether that can be done, and how it impacts other site development there?
Can you say that again, please?
Yes. Could you talk about the flipping of the building that's
Yeah.
been discussed and what the implications of that would be on the site development?
Well, that has major implications. You know, these elderly people with the north exposure would be a real problem. Sharing the road would also, we need to have the road there and not way to the north of our building because we're sharing it with the church. You know, there's just a lot of problems if we flip that building. And when you drive up to it, you don't want to look at the back of the building. Another big thing.
Is there anything you
Order, please. If you're not in front of the microphone, I ask respect. Thank you.
Is there anything you can tell us about the road that was proposed originally on the north side, contributing to the ability to move water and address the drainage concerns?
We had talked about it at one time, and the more that we thought about it, we decided, you know what, that's why we pulled it. It wasn't going to work for us, but we did consider it at one time.
Your
I got a question for the engineer, if possible.
Yeah, let's bring him up.
He's right behind you. Didn't I hear you say you're creating a swale so that to catch some of that water to run it to the detention pond?
Correct.
Behind the building, on the back side of the building? Or, let me rephrase that, where the back side of the building is generally proposed. Now, we're not approving the building location tonight. That's one. But didn't I hear you say you were going to create a swale back there?
Yes, so on the north property line, we got a berm, so we're gonna be building up a 2-foot berm, and it's 4-to-1 slopes, 2 foot, so you're 8, 16, with the topping, maybe 20 feet out with this berm and landscaping. And so that puts us down between 40 feet between the berm edge and the building. We'll put a swale through there to convey water around the building.
Basically the same thing as your curb and gutter,
Essentially.
without being hard surfaced.
So slower too, so instead of going down a pavement or in curb and gutter, it'll be in grass and can slow down the water getting to the pond.
Okay.
So, and tying back to the building, that concept C, we showed access to the north. That was prior to having the arrangement or talking with Sioux Falls Parks on their access, where they wanted to keep one access on there for the church. And so the compromise with removing the one church, our access point for the church, putting it in the middle so we could share it. So.
Was that to help with traffic?
So it helps with people on Keene Park Road going to the light for stacking at the stoplight. So they're not trying to get out of the entrance location right by the stoplight. So it's funneling traffic to the north further.
So what you're saying is if you were to keep the same access, you'd still have the same problem as you have right now with more traffic there, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you. Entertain commission action.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve item 9 with the two stipulations. The required side yard setback along the north property line be a minimum of 60 feet, and the buffer yard along the north property line shall include a 2-foot berm and a 6-foot privacy fence.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve item number 9 with those conditions as stated. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair? So I commend all you guys for kind of working through some of the issues, sitting down and talking with the neighbors and talking with the developers to at least throw out some ideas and suggestions. I appreciate the detention pond and the CW on the east side. I think that makes a lot of sense, and glad the developer was willing to compromise on that. And I think, as I said, is when we first started, we don't approve the plan, the layout, where the building looks, how high it is. Those are things that are done with code, with ordinance. We don't say you have to have this much brick, a red door, anything like that. We strictly look at the land. We're a land use body, and does it make sense to have a conservation and RA2 as a buffer between institutional and single family? And I think, yes, it does. I mean, that, as I look at the land, I think that makes sense. I thought it made sense the first time it came through. But do applaud the developer for going above and beyond and, working through the issues with the neighbors. So I support this one.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I agree with Commissioner Sershin. That is our job. We are a land use board, and I just would like to state that I agree with everything he said.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I also support Commissioner Sershin's comments, and also commend that they were able to get together on the traffic issue, the drainage issue, and seeing that they're with the two conditions, particularly with the larger setback of 60 feet, I think this is, which would carry to another owner, as Nick said earlier. I think this makes a lot of sense.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no.
No.
Thank you.
Pardon me, Commissioner Paulson? Was
Yes,
the no?
that's correct.
Thank you. Item 10, 9129-2018 rezone from the RS Single Family Residential Suburban District to the RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban District for allowed forms at 608 West 57th Street.
All right, the applicant here is Pat Beckman. He is proposing to rezone roughly 1.25 acres from the RS Single Family Residential District to the RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential District. He's looking at subdividing this lot into 3 lots, and then he would like to construct a twin home on each of the 3 lots. West 57th Street is identified as a limited access arterial street. The proposed twin homes will have access to South Duluth Avenue, and the additional traffic from these twin homes should be minimal onto South Duluth Avenue. The proposed zoning does meet the Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan. Typically, twin homes are located adjacent to large arterial streets, which 57th Street is, and provide that transition from the street to the single-family homes. The existing neighborhood is made up predominantly of single-family homes. There's some townhomes to the northwest, and there are some single-family homes already adjacent to West 57th Street, as you can see from the aerial. The applicant is proposing to create lots and twin homes similar in size and scale as the existing single-family houses within the neighborhood. This should help the twin homes fit in better with the existing neighborhood, established neighborhood. Because the subject application is consistent with the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan, staff does recommend approval of the rezoning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Jason, the lot being planned and zoned as it is right now, RS, single family, that's not inconsistent with Shape Places, is it?
That's not inconsistent with Shape Places. Most new developments with locations as this lot is going to be, I would say most of those would probably be zoned a higher density than single family. But this development has been here for quite some time.
So it would be okay?
We probably wouldn't encourage it, but we wouldn't say they couldn't, I guess is what I'm saying, yep.
Okay. Other questions?
Mr. Chair, so Jason, across the street, there's an RD2. Can you explain, and the proposal is on this parcel is to make it an RD1. Can you explain the difference between an RD2 and an RD1?
Sure. RD1 would just allow twin homes or duplexes on it. The RD2 zoning, as you can see, it's pretty much where the existing zoning tab and proposed zoning tab is. That would allow townhomes, and you'd be allowed to go up to 8 to 12 units of townhomes. I think those ones there are 3 units at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jason. Is the applicant here this evening? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Pat Beckman. My office is 1601 East 69th Street. I am proposing to build these 3 twin homes. They will be walkouts. If you're familiar with the land, there's a sharp drop off to the back. So we'll be able to build walkouts, which is kind of an advantage. Estimated value of these will be somewhere around the $600,000 per unit, plus or minus. And I say that because when you get into that price range, people start making a lot of changes and you don't know whether they're going to go cut some things out, or usually they add quite a bit to it. So that's where the value is hard to set right now. I've received, or the city has received 10 letters, and I gave you a copy of a map kind of indicating where those letters come from. There's 2 of them that I don't know for sure, but I feel that maybe they got a phone call from a friend and said, would you please write a letter? One of them faces Minnesota Avenue, and one of them is on, both of them are addressed onto Bachelor Lane, but they're a long ways from this project. And I kind of say that so that when you start counting letters that you take into consideration that they really aren't affected by this project at all. Another 2 letters are from townhouses that are in that area. They are approximately a third of a block north on the west side of the street. Some of the reasons that people were stated that they were against it in the letters was one, you alter the neighborhood. And while we are adding something that has not a lot of there, you do have those townhouses. Some of them are 4 units per building, and the tax rate on them, which doesn't really have a lot to do with the value, but they're in the high 200s to low 300s. Obviously, some of the other homes in this neighborhood are $800 to $1 million. You're going to, in the letters, they also said that by putting these units in here, they'll decrease the value of their home. One is the price, which I don't believe will deter anything. And I have sat on a board like on this board years ago, and that's always one of the first arguments in there is that you're going to decrease the value of my house. And I have never, ever seen proof of it. You'll get somebody's opinions, but you can never find proof that a project has lowered the value. Project such as this has lowered the value. The other thing was traffic, and of course the city has stated that there will be minimal amount of traffic caused by this. The water drainage has been a question, and I assume that you have had a map that shows where that ditch is through the back, but there's a drop inlet on 57th Street that feeds that ditch with a 12-inch pipe. The drop from the end of that pipe to the north end where the drainage is about 10 to 12 feet drop, and it drops into a 30-inch pipe. So the water that would come off of these 6 units, some of it will go off the driveways in the front part of the house, will go out to Duluth, just like the rest of the houses that are on Duluth. The balance of it will go down to that ditch and out through that 30-inch pipe. There's probably 5.5 feet from the bottom of that ditch to the corner of where that red line ends, which is there's a drop, that's where the pipe is at that point, and it's buried. Like I said, the floor of that pipe is about 5 feet before you get to the sidewalk. The other thing that people have been somewhat concerned about is they think I'm bringing in a lot of fill dirt, and I'm not. This project is what we call pretty close to being balanced. The amount of dirt that I will cut out of the basements will be pushed back up against some retaining walls that we will be putting in that will make a little bit of a flat backyard. The estimate from the engineers is that I will have to bring, for the 3 buildings, I will have to bring in about 15 to 20 truckloads is all. That's 5 truckloads per house, which is really not very much dirt being brought in. Those are the main arguments that I have seen from these people. One other one is that they say, okay, so you want to build twin homes here. What's going to happen to the lot to the east of you? I tried to buy that, and Lowell would not, Hanson would not sell it. He says, that's my backyard, my privacy. Whatever happens down the line from him, I don't know, but as you can see from this map, that's his big backyard, and it's been there forever. The last thing is that the neighbors have always asked that this stay single-family dwellings. I don't know if they know, but according to city code, we can put in 6 single-family lots in there, 50-foot wide, 100-foot deep, and they will fit into that project, into that size lot. Any questions?
Any questions from the commission?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this item? Come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, I'm Tom Herman. I live at 4701 South Duluth, directly across. According to the Sioux Falls rezoning information sheet on your website, your criteria to consider this rezoning request are based generally on the following 5 items from your website. Number 1, the comprehensive plan, which is only 1 of 5. The plan was adopted after my purchase in 2016. All other adjacent owners were there many years prior, and most of the neighborhood too. I believe it is flawed on my opinion of the compatibility rating. It favors those requesting rezoning over existing homeowners. It is tilted towards landowners, developers, and the city at the expense of the surrounding owners. Looking over the last years of minutes from the Planning Commission, I could not find one no vote on any rezoning put forward. Disturbed me. I quote from the staff report, building elements and scale should be consistent with the surrounding proposed and existing developments. That would be RS2 single-family homes. Twin home is just not a good fit. Yes, number 2 is adjacent land uses. All are single-family homes, all are opposed, but there is no mention at all in the staff report, a serious misconsideration. Number 3, adjacent zoning districts. We purchased our house knowing that the RS2 zoning across the street would mean one future home on that lot. If we knew twin homes would be built, we would have never bought that property. What reliability is in the city information and zoning maps available at the time, and why bother to have zoning if you change it upon request? Number 4, the nature of the proposed land use. I thought density would be one home across the street. Now he proposes 6-to-1 increase in density, vehicles, and traffic. Monday, I noticed that the buffer lot to protect the landowner has been platted. There is no buffer for the 8 other adjacent homes. I do not consider the increase in density of 6-to-1 compatible with minor conflict. Size and scale might help, but what other than code will hold them to that? I know Lot 7, which was not on that piece, recently replatted, is not in this request, but heed must be given to it. Its rezoning could change the density to 12-to-1 possibly, plus traffic and vehicles. Why would there not be a 66-foot wide entrance and egress to Duluth if additional multiple twin homes are not planned for the future? The domino effect would be a major concern, and there will be no recourse for the homeowners affected should that occur. Last but not least is the impact such rezoning would have on the surrounding and existing neighborhood. The proposed rezoning will dramatically alter the character of the existing neighborhood. All 6 adjacent homeowners are opposed, not mentioned, and 12 other neighbors expressed opposition. There is no mention of this opposition in the staff report, just a sidebar PDF listing. Staff appears to have used only the shape of Sioux Falls comprehensive plan document when compiling the report, ignoring all opposition. I believe that the correct course of action is to deny the rezoning request. And it is a rebuttal to Pat Buckman's comment. It has been vacant, from what I understand, for a long, long time because the owner has asked an unreasonable price. That's not an issue here, but that's a reason. Somebody here, I believe, also stated there's no need necessarily by the code or the transition book for transition site. And the people that he mentioned that are not close, I beg to differ. They're on a 1-block street. The townhomes were there prior to any single-family homes being built on that street. The people at the end of the street on Bachelor Drive are the result of all of the water coming down that hill, and there are videos of watching great, huge, 3-4 foot deep swirls of water coming. And the lower value, that's not an issue. I do have one item that, I'm not sure which way, I didn't watch what he did. Okay. The outline piece is the property in question roughly. The rest of the area, other than the townhomes, which are there before any of the others, were all single-family homes. Across 57th, single-family homes. The property that faced Minnesota, we're on air, his property is within 300 feet of the proposed request. So he is a concern. I believe by code it goes 300 feet from the property line. So I question whether all things have been considered, and I respectfully think that you should deny the rezoning request. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Hearing none. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this item? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Linda Stotts. Sorry if you have trouble hearing me, just ask me to repeat. My husband Matt and I live at 4504 South Duluth. 3 homes down the hill to the north of this proposed twin home development. When we bought our land for our home, before we built it 23 years ago, there was one comment made by the person selling the lot, just a sentence, you know, there are springs in this area. And we didn't really think anything of it at the time. We went ahead and bought it and made some plans to build our home. When we dug into that hill, however, we did find quite a few springs. We had stopped building, we hired an engineer, put in some drain tile, got permission from the city and tied that into the storm sewer. We were able to build our home. But then after living there, we discovered that, you know, the homes in the area with this very steep slope that goes along Duluth, which you don't really appreciate from these pictures, when it rains, there's so much water that comes down on the properties from the north to us, or from the south down to us in the north, that it actually caused so much damage to our driveway that we had to hire an engineer, do an engineering plan from Sayer Engineering did it for us. We pulled out our entire driveway, had to put in a 6-inch thick driveway with rebar, did a big manhole drainage thing in the back to pull water off from one side of our property, and tiled underneath the drive from the hill where the springs are, and then also around the drive, again with permission with the city to go into the storm sewer. This project involved tens of thousands of dollars. And so water is the reason I'm here appealing this to you today, my husband and I. We don't feel that Mr. Beckman either has been fully informed by the seller of the springs in this area. All of our neighbors know about them because all of them have water in their basements or water on their property causing damage to their property like we did. We're pretty tight with our water now. What our fear is that because he may not know what he's going to dig into, we didn't see anything in your staff report other than the Sayer Engineering of the plat, and I called Sayer because they worked with us. Monty Miller told me they platted it only, they did not do any detailed drainage plan. So without a drainage plan, like this other people that were up here before us, they have done swaling, which we did in our yard, berms, landscaping, whatever it takes, detention pond. I don't honestly know without a plan whether all that extra water that flows down our street and damages the street that they're going to funnel from the way they redo this is not going to cause domino effect on our neighbors, the Schultzes, next to them, the Olsons, and then ourselves. So I would just like respectfully to request two things. I think Mr. Beckman should be required to do soil testing, geotech, whoever he uses, that's who we used. Scott Gelming, I'd be happy to give you his number. If you don't believe me, he built our home, he knows about the springs. He'd be very happy to tell you what he found. I talked to him last Friday, and he'd be very happy to speak with you. Secondly, I spoke to Russ Jankel, who's a family friend. He gave me the name of Greg Greenfield, who's a lawyer here in town. And he made me aware of a state statute that says the following: 46A10B30, drainage report and construction plan requirement for subdivision approval. Prior to the final approval of the plat of any subdivision, the owners of the property being subdivided shall at the owner's cost prepare a detailed drainage report and construction plans for the installation of all stormwater facilities required for subdivision, including any offsite facilities required to convey stormwater to existing drains, channels, streams, detention ponds, or other points, all in conformity with the master drainage plan of the district and the design criteria and construction standards adopted by the governing body and the board. The governing body shall review the reports, plans, and cost estimates. The governing body may approve the plat of a subdivision if the governing body has been furnished with acceptable assurance that the facilities will be constructed and installed as indicated and approved. So my request of you today is we feel that you should defer this until you have been given the appropriate drainage and engineering plans required to ensure that there will not be added flooding and damage to our property. And, you know, we don't have a lawyer yet because we didn't really think we would need one at this point, but, you know, I mean, after all we've gone through with the water issues in our area, I don't hesitate to say that we would certainly get one involved if we needed to.
Okay, thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, just a couple things. So this isn't a subdivision plan, so that was done before anything was built in this area. This is strictly a rezoning. But he'll have to go through the drainage engineers with the city before he gets a building permit, which is where all that will be taken into account. The only thing we're looking at today is whether or not twin homes is a reasonable zoning next to a major street. So I guess what I'm telling you is your drainage concerns will be handled through ordinance and through city staff and the engineers. They will make sure that Mr. Beckman follows all of the laws, rules, and regulations to make sure he doesn't impact your property with excess water.
So you're saying that after whatever you do here today, then does it go to the city council and he has to have the drainage plans to them at that point?
No, that before he gets a building permit, he'll need to do that. So before he's allowed to construct anything, the city engineers will go through the code with him to make sure he's following all the steps. What we're doing tonight is looking at this piece of ground and saying, is it reasonable to build twin homes there?
So to break it down for you, we have planning commission tonight, then it'll go to city council, and then basically before he can get a building permit, he'll have to provide that information to the city to get that building permit.
So then the city council approves it after
After us.
right, but after he gives them the drainage plan
that'll
before
be
they approve it?
It'll be reviewed, or after the city council, will be reviewed by the city staff, correct? Okay, yeah, by the city staff, and then they will give a building permit based on that.
So how can we be assured, and maybe you can't really answer this question, but how can we be assured that that he won't be just required to do the minimum and that there won't be water? Just from our experience, I mean, you can look in front, after the water we had a few weeks ago in front of our neighbors down to the south of us, I mean, the streets all torn apart from the water. And so, because if you don't live where we live, you don't really appreciate how damaging water can be to your property. And so far, the way that, as he mentioned, those lots go down so far to build those homes in there, how that easement that's there and the water will go out and not possibly result in more damage to our homes without proper drainage. I don't know how that can be determined.
By law.
I think we understand the question. I think city staff has some additional comments to help you kind of understand the process.
Sure.
Jeff?
Okay, please. Thank you.
I won't help. She's not going to get the answer she wants. But what we're trying to say is that he has to meet the minimum building code standards and engineering standards. So she even said, so how is he going to fix this if he's not just going to meet minimum standards? That's all a applicant has to meet. We have minimum standards to fix and make things the same. So I'll say that again. As she just heard on the application before this and on this one, we know from her testimony that there's water coming off this site. The water can continue to come off this site, and any development on this site can't make it worse. He won't necessarily make it better. He won't fix it. He won't improve it. He could. Anybody could. But they cannot make it any worse for the applicant than it is right now. Now, again, once they bring in fill and backyards, and will it direct it differently? Will it go down that pipe? That's what they'll look at, and it will probably be improved, but it will never make it any worse than it is now. And that's what we have to look at as for city staff and public works in regards to water, traffic, drainage engineering, building codes for how the houses are constructed.
And that's by city ordinance.
And that's by city ordinance. That's correct.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Actually, you've had your 5 minutes. Is there someone else that would like to speak to this item, though? Come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Dwayne Rydell, and I am 4705 South Duluth, a very corner house. up there adjacent, immediately across from this twin home rezoning proposal. You know, and I, as a homeowner directly across from property, you are considering changing this zoning from single family to RD1, am adamantly opposed to any consideration to change this zoning. My wife and I purchased our land, built our home, knowing that all of the adjacent property was single family zoning 28 years ago. The lots were large and uniquely designed for single family homes. And we would never consider purchasing a building if they were not. And you can see the large lots and homes there. Your consideration of this rezoning will change the character of this neighborhood. We just invested $170,000 remodeling our home. We invested in our house because we felt we would always get the value back from our expense. Because of the great neighborhood of single family homes we have surrounding our home. Changing the zoning directly across the street to allow these twin homes will affect my home's value, resale, no question, and the adjacent neighbors, no matter what Pat said. I would not consider buying the home I own now with twin homes across the street. We will also be affected by having 6 homes directly across from our home with the street parking issues that are going to happen. My wife and I own twin homes in town and condos where property was already zoned that way and we knew what we were getting. When we purchased them, street parking is a major issue, but we knew that. If you approve this rezoning from single family, our house and us and our immediate neighbors will now be faced with that big problem too. And you can see that. There will be 6 homes right against R2. And on that side with the double garages, short garages, or short length of driveways, they're going to be 25 feet. Most homes are triple. There's not going to be a lot of parking. And we're having all those 6 access roads, going to be very little street parking. We're going to be faced with that. And that will change the character of our area. I ask here every member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, would any of you want the property immediately across from your home? You have invested so much of your life, money, and efforts to be changed from single family to twin homes. The lots and land you're considering should remain single family as the property was owned by the city. If the prospective buyer can build twin homes, then of course single family homes can be built there on that land as the zoning commission had the land zoned. The area in question, last, is bordered on all sides with single family homes. Therefore, the idea of the Shape Sioux Falls plan for transitional housing is not applicable to this site. There is no need for a transition. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
And I hope you'll consider that because, again, if you look at the parking, the area, it will change it drastically. And they can build, the seller can redesign those lots very easily to make it accommodate single-family homes. And this, especially us directly across, and the people down below with the water problems and us directly across, it's going to affect our neighborhood and our resale. So
I think I can speak for the commission that we do consider all the testimony presented, so I can assure you of that.
So you would be okay with having single-family homes across the street?
yes, you know, I think they should be to the area. You know, nobody's going to build 6 single-family homes across the street. You know, the land for the value and stuff like that. If it was designed in different ways, easily, I could see 2 homes being built across the street. It is a nice area, and that's why we built there. Now you are changing it. And I will ask each of you, if you had a home there, and like I said, we just spent $170,000 redoing the whole exterior of our house, and we're spending big money on the inside. If we knew these twin homes were coming up, we would not have done that. I wouldn't have bought there across from the twin homes. And I feel the city is adversely affected our home value if they go ahead with this decision.
Okay, thank you.
It's double garages, not triple. I can't see the value being there. Short driveways, that parking, if we all know twin homes, and like I said, I own them, and it's a nightmare, parking, congestion, everything else. That's all coming across the street to us.
Thank you.
City here, I asked you to imagine if that was yourself, so.
Okay, other questions from the commission? Hearing none. Thank you, sir.
Please consider if it was your neighborhood.
Thank you. Come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Debbie Olson. I live at 4600 South Duluth. I just have a question about this plat. I know that we're talking about rezoning this one, but what about, since that's automatic, if that gets rezoned, what happens to the 2 lots next to it that have been platted? Are they going to be rezoned? So then we would have more multiple family dwellings behind the twin homes.
Well, that is not the request in front of us.
But if you rezone this one, what happens to these 2 lots? Pat, do you know?
It depends on what the owner of the lots wants to do, if they want to leave it or if they want to come in and make a change. And if they want to try to come in and make a change, we'll have the same hearing
thing
again.
And since it's already rezoned multiple, then it would be automatic?
No, they'd have to go through this process.
But that's why they're leaving the 66-foot driveway to the left there, so they can build 2 multi-dwellings behind that?
I think an easement for a drive is required when you have a large lot that doesn't have direct street access. And in this case, 57th Street is not considered a place where that access can happen. So that's a requirement of the
So it's an
property.
extra requirement for Lowell Hanson's land?
So you can't.
I don't know all the details of it.
You can't landlock a property, so they have to have access to be able to get to their property, since that is a separate lot.
So we don't really have any guarantee that these won't be more multifamily dwellings behind us?
Don't know.
And there's no guarantee, there's nothing we can do about that except be against rezoning this one to keep that single family?
If this one got denied, they could come back and request that one to be twin homes too.
Behind?
Yeah. There's, any property owner has the right
to ask
petition for a rezoning. Yep.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Thank you for your comments. Yes, come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, I'm Greg Schultz. I live at 4604 South Duluth Avenue. First of all, thank you for your service to our community, we appreciate it. My wife and I both rise to oppose the rezoning efforts, and we basically would just reiterate what our fine neighbors stated tonight. And I would like to just reemphasize our concern is water egress with topographic changes next to us. It is a major, major concern, and I know you're trying to reassure us that it's going to get taken care of, but when we hear about he has to just do minimal things, and like the Stotzes and the Olsons, we live right next to this, and we see what happens, and it is a major change. So I think it's a real concern. So again, thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none. Entertain commission action.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to, I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 10 for discussion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for item number 10 for discussion. Any discussion?
If I may lead off, Mr. Chair. First of all, I heard some comments earlier on in testimony that the commission always votes yes. I think we do have the blessing to get to vote yes quite a bit due to the hard work of the staff, the knowledge of the staff and their understanding of city ordinance, the code, the comprehensive plan. And I want to, just a quick note on the comprehensive plan, excuse me, that was approved by or developed by the staff, approved by the Planning Commission at that time. The City Council also affirmed it, referred to a public vote, and even that was approved. So kudos to everyone in that process who gives us that framework to do this work.
Plus, there was a no vote the item before.
Well, yeah. Okay. I said we get to vote yes a lot. I didn't say all the time. In any case, regarding this, I think the comments were made earlier on by some of our fellow commission that we're dealing with the land use here. And do twin homes make sense across from single family right on an arterial street? Generally speaking, they do. I'm inclined to believe that this is also an appropriate application for them, especially with RD2 density 2 doors down that was arguably there before any of these single family dwellings were zoned to purchased. So anyway, more to come on that. But also the comment earlier, would I want to have $600,000 twin homes across the street from my house? Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'm not supportive of this application. As I tried to address earlier, I think it's putting a new twin home zoning designation inside adjacent single-family zoned properties. And part of the reason for being against it is that in terms of where the transition rule applies, otherwise, those are areas where new development is being planned and zoned for those purposes. And consideration is also then being given to issues of drainage and the process of traffic, as well as consistency within the neighborhood. So that's why I'm opposed to it.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Can I ask Jeff a question? So Jeff, with the current zoning, how many single-family homes can be put on this piece of ground?
How many acres is this site?
It's 1 1/4.
1.25. Yeah, you could put, at 50 feet for a minimum lot frontage, you could get between 5 and 6 lots going from 57th Street to the north. So, and again, depending on how you wanted to look at how that lot subdivided. So it's a really interesting lot depth. So, but the lot frontage is all that we restrict. So single family homes have a minimum, they don't have a lot size, but you have to have street frontage on Duluth at 50 feet. So how you get them to fit on that site at 50 feet.
It'd be a tight lot for 6 single family homes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions for Jeff?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Well, I just wanted, sorry. Basically just to talk about the price. I mean, there's really no effect on price on having townhomes across the street, or twin homes. It just, you've got townhomes down the street, and basically you're hitting a price point of 600,000 is what he's targeting for. I mean, you could go in here with single family homes with a 50, I mean, I'm just running in my head, I think you'd probably be at, you could put $200,000, $300,000 homes on that type of lot. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but that's typically the size of a lot that you would have for that size of home. So I think he's looked around, and I'm just putting probably words in his mouth, but basically he's looked around and said, hey, you know, I want to hit a certain price point to also be respectful to the neighbors too. And I'm guessing that's probably what his thought process is on that. But for a price standpoint, there's really no effect that's going to be caused based on that.
Okay, other discussion?
Mr. Chair? You know, Commissioner Paulson talked about the neighbors and their rights being next to a vacant piece of land, but I think we also have to look at the individual property rights of the person that owns that piece of ground. It's obviously been for sale, and to keep it single family, anybody could have bought it and built a house there. Now somebody who's looking to buy it or has bought it and is looking at twin homes, you know, they have a reasonable right to expect to be able to do what they want to with their property as well. And to echo my other commissioners here, this is a spot where you would typically find twin homes, condos, or maybe even more dense than 2. So I'm going to support this one.
Okay, other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no.
No.
That's 1 no for the record.
Item 11, 9222-2018, conditional use permit for on-sale alcoholic beverage establishment located within 500 feet on sensitive land use located at 2300 South Minnesota Avenue, Suite C.
The applicant is looking at applying for a full-service restaurant alcohol license in the former Zamarcus Noodles restaurant tenant space in this existing multi-tenant building. It is located at 2300 South Minnesota Avenue. The proposed full-service restaurant does meet the Shape Sioux Falls comprehensive plan. This is an existing arterial corridor with commercial uses. Further, as I indicated before, the previous tenant space was also a full-service restaurant that served beer. Lighting of the structure and soundproofing of the property are items to be considered at the public hearing. The parking is on site, and approved security management plan is required before this alcohol license will be considered by the City Council. Because the application does provide clarity to indicate the nature and extent of the work proposed, staff does recommend approval of this conditional use permit. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the commission? Thank you, Jason. Is the applicant here this evening? Come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name's Lian Tan, and I'm the applicant, and I live in 120 East Knife Avenue, Mitchell, South Dakota, 57301.
Okay. Anything to add to Jason's review?
No.
Okay. Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I have one question. Is this where the Zamerix was on Minnesota? Okay. Zamerix, okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak to this item? You're certainly welcome to come forward and
No, we don't have any water problems.
give your name and address for the record, please.
Cheryl Taylor. I'm the property owner. My sister and I own it. Just like Zamerix, the alcohol will not be a primary offering on the menu. It's just like a little enhancement. Like if you go to any of the Japanese restaurants, it's just maybe you want a little beer, maybe not. I don't know. So it's not a major offering on the menu.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, hearing none.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve item number 11. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, since this same location came before this board when Zamerix was there and we approved it, I think that it would be, I would support this conditional use permit.
Okay. Any
Mr.
other
Chair,
discussion?
I'd like to echo that also, so.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Item 12, 9160-2018, alternative site plan for an alternative landscape plan located at the northwest corner of East 57th Street and South Dubuque Avenue.
The applicant is looking at providing the one tree for every 50 feet of street frontage along 57 and Dubuque Avenue. They're looking at providing those outside of the existing front yard setback. As we have seen with some other properties within this area, there's an existing 60-foot drainage and storm sewer easement along 57th Street. And so they're looking at placing the trees in the front yard. However, they will be outside that 10-foot front yard setback. This request will be located still south of the building and along 57th Street and should meet the intent of the trees in the front yard as required by the Shape Places zoning ordinance. Because the subject application meets the intent of the landscaping requirements within that ordinance, staff does recommend approval of this property, or of this application, excuse me. And then just one other quick note is this would cover then all those proposed offices along there, not just this one that they're showing in this site plan. So.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. Is the applicant here? Come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Jason Burns here representing Signature Companies, 4800 East 57th Street, Suite A. I don't really have anything to add other than what Jason has already provided. I will say all the offices on the west half of that power line is pretty much the same thing as what we're doing, is just carrying it all the way down. So we don't have to do this again for every property going down in the future. So any questions for me?
Any questions from the commission? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address this item? Seeing none, I'd entertain commission action.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve item 12.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item number 12. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would hope after testimony tonight, we wouldn't do anything to impact the drainage there by putting trees in the way. So it's a great idea to move it out of that area.
Well stated. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. We're at the end of our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. We are adjourned. Make it a good night, Sioux Falls.